All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something called the paradox of learning, going all the way from the tiniest synapses in our heads to the concept of the social brain. Now, we usually think of learning as just, memorizing facts for a test, but we're going to explore the actual neurobiology behind how it all works. And as you'll see, the way our brains grab onto information is this absolutely wild mix of biological architecture, pure survival instincts, and really deep social connections.
To really get why it's a paradox, consider this pretty chilling story from the Book of Judges. So the Ephraimites were captured at the River Jordan, and their literal survival depended on pronouncing just one single word correctly, shibboleth. But because they didn't have that specific sh sound in their native dialect, they said sibboleth. They couldn't learn this one pronunciation even to save their own lives, and 42,000 of them died. Now contrast that massive, fatal failure of learning with how instantly we memorize the sheer terror of a sudden thunderstorm. It's kind of like that terrifying opening scene in Shakespeare's Macbeth, right? With the thunder, lightning, and the witches. One exposure to that kind of fear, and it is locked in your brain forever.
And that right there sets up the ultimate paradox of learning, doesn't it? It completely forces us to ask, why on earth do our brains absorb some experiences in an absolute flash while stubbornly, completely rejecting others, even when we have immense motivation to learn them? I mean, how can a single terrifying encounter be permanently etched into our minds, while extreme motivation, literally the threat of death, can completely fail to make us learn a new phonetic sound? Well, to solve this mystery, we have to look at how the brain is actually structured.
Now, to really understand this, we have to rewind and look at how we've historically viewed the brain. Take the late 19th century idea of phrenology. Back then, people actually believed you could strict pinpoint cognitive functions and personality traits, like, say, cautiousness or ideality, to precise, tiny little compartments on the skull. Obviously, we know now that's completely wrong, but honestly, it did help society start accepting that cognitive functions are tied to specific physical brain structures. Modern neuroscience, though, reveals a reality that is way more dynamic and deeply interconnected.
So let's zoom way in, down to the cellular level. Think about a cerebellar Purkinje cell. These things are famous for having this massive, incredibly complex, tree-like branching structure. Cells just like this are the fundamental building blocks of our entire nervous system. If we wanted to find learning at its most basic foundational level, we have to look closely at these gorgeous, complicated neurons. Because they don't just sit there doing nothing. They actively reach out and communicate with each other.
And here's the really crazy part. As the scientist Ramon E. Cajal first figured out, our nervous system isn't just one long, solid, continuous wire. It's actually a discontinuous road network. There's a literal physical gap between the neurons. When an electrical signal reaches the very end of one neuron, chemical neurotransmitters have to physically jump across that tiny synaptic gap to trigger a reaction in the next cell. And because it's discontinuous, because of that gap, these chemical connection points can literally change their physical shape based on our past experiences.
The actual magic of learning happens exactly right there in that gap. Since about 1973, researchers have been studying this incredible phenomenon called long-term potency, or LTP. Basically, when these neural pathways get high-frequency stimulation, when they fire over and over, the synaptic connections actually get stronger and way more efficient, and they stay that way for a long time. This is neuroplasticity in action. It is absolute proof that our brains physically, structurally change and adapt based on what we experience. Learning, at the molecular level, is literally just the biochemical modification of our synapses.
But here's the thing. Learning isn't just one single monolithic process happening everywhere all at once. Our memory systems are highly diverse. On one side, you've got declarative or explicit memory. These are the conscious facts you can just state out loud, like your name or what you ate for breakfast. But on the other side is procedural or implicit memory. These are the intuitively known skills like riding a bicycle, or, perfectly naturally, knowing the complex grammar rules of your native language without ever actively thinking about them. And we know for a fact these are completely separate systems. Why? Because they're amnesiac patients who completely lose all declarative memory of their entire past life, but they can still easily learn a brand new procedural skill. It's fascinating.
When we actually map these different systems out in the brain, we see very distinct regions taking charge. The hippocampus manages all those declarative facts. But right there in the center sits the amygdala. Working together with the hypothalamus, this little almond-shaped structure is a powerful chemical trigger. It can instantly increase your heart rate, flood your body with hormones, and basically act like a high-powered drug delivery center in your brain. And this emotional memory system perfectly explains the first half of our paradox. It's exactly why fearful, intensely emotional events, like a crazy thunderstorm or a terrifying accident, are permanently locked into our memory after just one single exposure. The amygdala makes sure of it.
So, knowing that learning is deeply tied to brain structure and intense emotion brings us right to the second piece of our paradox. We know those adult Ephraimites couldn't learn a new language sound, even to save their lives. Yet babies do this absolutely effortlessly, all the time. So why do we have these specific sensitive periods in our biological development where infants are just naturally incredible at tasks that mature, fully developed adult brains find nearly impossible?
Well, let's look at what's actually going on inside an infant's brain. Early in life, right around birth, our brains undergo this massive, super exuberant overproduction of neurons and synapses. It is a literal biological battlefield in there. Imagine two axons actively competing in a developing cortex. After just a few hours, only one of them survives. It's a crude, incredibly harsh struggle for survival, where literally only the most heavily used synaptic connections get to stick around.
We actually see this process, called axon pruning, play out beautifully in the mammalian visual system. It starts out as this chaotic, messy, overlapping web of connections, but through progressive segregation, it prunes down into neat, organized, mature pathways. This entirely busts that popular neuromyth that having more synapses is somehow better, or that aggressively overstimulating a baby is automatically going to make them a genius. In reality, this biological process of cell death and actively, aggressively forgetting the unused pathways is exactly what makes the mature adult brain function so efficiently.
Now, to really test the limits of this incredible infant plasticity, researcher Patricia Kuhl did this brilliant study. She exposed American 9-month-old infants to Mandarin Chinese, a language that has sounds English-speaking adults literally cannot distinguish. She tried 3 different methods: having a live native speaker play with the babies, playing them an audio recording, and showing them a video DVD. And the results completely shatter how we think about early education. The babies who actually interacted with the live human showed a massive ability to distinguish the foreign sounds. But the babies exposed to the DVD or the audio tape, they learned absolutely nothing. 0. Their results were identical to a control group that had never heard the language at all.
So the ultimate takeaway here, the real secret, is that we are fundamentally biologically social brains. Sticking a baby in front of an educational DVD to try and stimulate brain development is quite literally a biological waste of time. And why is that? Because the brain systems responsible for our emotions play a hugely significant, completely intertwined role in how we learn. Live human interaction, playfulness, genuine emotion, these aren't just nice bonuses. They are the essential biological catalysts for true neural plasticity. You can't just pipe data into a human brain like you're programming a computer. It absolutely requires a social context.
So, let's wrap up this explainer by asking ourselves a pretty profound question. If genuine human connection and emotional engagement are the ultimate biological keys to unlocking the brain's massive learning potential, if our very synapses physically rely on it to grow, how drastically do we need to rethink things? How much do we need to change the way we teach our children, the way we work together in our jobs, and the way we connect as a society? Because the science is clear. If we really want to build better minds, we absolutely have to start by building better human connections.